Hey, everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Glad to have you aboard here on February the 18th, 2022. Episode 27 here. Lots of tour news in our first segment, News of the World. A resolution, possibly, to last week's Pearl Jam Motley Crue feud. New Journey coming soon, so let's start off with that. Neil Sean posted album artwork, album name, and the track listing for Journey's next album. First new album from them in over 10 years. It will be called Freedom. 15 songs. Unfortunately and bizarrely, no release date yet, though. Usually, when you've got the album artwork and the track listing set, you usually get a release date with that, but so far nothing from the Journey camp as far as when we're going to see and be able to hear Freedom. As I mentioned, lots of touring news. We're getting to the point now where the big acts have to set up their summer tours pretty much now, because once we get into March and April, it's a little bit harder logistically to get something like that going. So we found out this week Rod Stewart and Cheap Trick are going out on the road together. And I've seen Cheap Trick as a headliner. I've seen them as a support act many times. I could care less about Rod Stewart, to be honest with you. But I find it fascinating that Cheap Trick has decided to relegate themselves to a support act now on these big stadium and big arena tours. I've seen them open for Heart. I've seen them open for ZZ Top. I don't know if they get a better payday doing it that way. More people are going to see them as a combo with two or three other big acts. Now, the one time I did see Cheap Trick as a headliner, they were pretty bad. So maybe they're more comfortable doing things this way, a shorter set. Again, maybe they're looking at the fact the audience is going to be bigger. I don't know about the payday, splitting the money, but anyway, they are opening for Rod Stewart this coming summer. Paul McCartney just today announced he's going on a short trek across the country. Unfortunately, coming nowhere near the Midwest, so unless he adds dates, we're not going to get to see Sir Paul in my neck of the woods anytime soon. Which is a shame, because I had a shot right before COVID hit of getting tickets to see him. Obviously, the show never happened. I don't know if it ever went through, if it ever got rescheduled and he played it or not, but had issues, technical issues, trying to get tickets for that particular show here. And it was really the last and only best shot I can remember in recent history of getting to see him. And I would like to see him at least once. And we all know Father Time is not kind, and Paul is really getting up there in years. So I'm hoping he expands this tour and plays somewhere here in the Midwest, so I can have one last shot at seeing him. Of course, when it comes to the music I love, everybody knows I love the 80s hard rock, the 80s hair metal bands. And it's been delayed and delayed, but finally it looks like it's going to happen. Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Poison, and Joan Jett, the big, huge stadium tour, looks like it's finally going to take place. All those dates from 2020 when COVID hit have been rescheduled. Plus, they have added, I believe, 5 new dates, including one near the Maestro. So it looks like a definite possibility that even though I've seen all 4 acts before, I will get to see the Crue, Poison, Def Leppard, and Joan Jett one more time. Speaking of Motley Crue, of course, we had some fun last week with the whole Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder, Motley Crue, Nikki Sixx little mini feud that going back and forth between Vedder and Nikki Sixx and the Pearl Jam Twitter feed. Well, it looks like cooler heads have prevailed. Kind of find this funny because it looks like Eddie Vedder's bandmates are in a way turning on him. Stone Gossard, of course, one of the founding members of Pearl Jam, came out in a podcast recently after this whole war of words between Vedder and Nikki Sixx. And Stone Gossard, and he was speaking also for 2 other longtime members of Pearl Jam, Jeff Ament and Mike McCready, and he was saying those 3 loved the 80s hard rock. And Stone Gossard, in particular, in this interview, said he actually bought Motley Crue's debut album when it was on an indie label, even before they hit it big and got their big time record deal. So I do find it interesting that Stone Gossard, and again, he was speaking for the other 2 guys, so I'll just say Stone Gossard looks like he's trying to be the bigger man. He's trying to diffuse this situation. Of course, Eddie Vedder's out on the road in support of his brand new solo album, Earthling, which we will review next week here on the Fortress of Rock. But again, seems kind of funny that Stone Gossard, along with Jeff Ament and Mike McCready of Pearl Jam, have to calm the waters and build that bridge between the 80s hair bands and the 90s grunge movement. Good to see. I like both bands, so I hate to see that. I've always said I like grunge a lot. Nirvana is the one exception. I've never understood the massive appeal of Nirvana, but I do love Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. You want to throw Stone Temple Pilots in there. Nirvana is really the only one I never could get into. And I've always said grunge was the last great era of music, of rock music. And then after that, once we got into the mid to late 90s, everything fell apart. And for the last 25 years or so, it's been a lot of garbage. What you want to say is a seismic shift in popularity and tastes when it comes to music. All right, so finally going back to tour news. We've talked about Bon Jovi is going out on tour in April. I was fortunate enough to have gotten tickets to see that one. So it's been a long, long time since I've seen Bon Jovi, and I'm still in my mid-50s brain trying to recollect the exact details of when I saw them. Even Googling and trying to do research on the internet, because we're talking about when they were really, really just starting out. I think they were touring in support of Fahrenheit, their second album. They were opening, I want to say they were opening for Def Leppard, but I don't know if that's 100% accurate. I could swear that I did see them as an opening act once in the early 80s. But again, I can't find you proof. It's the one band out of all the concerts, the hundreds of concerts I've seen, where I can't come up with proof. I can't remember. I remember I saw them at the Notre Dame ACC in Northern Indiana. I just can't for the life of me find that bill. I want to say it was almost a triple bill. But again, I cannot find definitive proof when they played Notre Dame, who they played with. But I swear to God, I saw Bon Jovi once as an opening act in the early 80s. So this will be, by my estimation, the second time I have seen them. And of course, a big, big gap, 40 years between first and second time seeing John Bon Jovi. So there you go, kids. Pretty brief news of the world segment for you this week. We've had a lot of technical difficulties here with all our podcasts. Of course, we also do Sports Frenzy 2.0 and X2Z. Sports Frenzy 2.0 had a lot of problems last night as we tried to tape it. So hopefully we will be okay now, a day removed from all those issues, and we'll get this uploaded for you. And again, we're trying something different over the last couple of weeks. We've gotten rid of the music breaks to try to expand the audience, which now not only includes Spotify, but Apple and Stitcher. And we're going to have some more, I would think, by the time the next episode hits. We should have a few more platforms involved with the Fortress. So for right now, we got a quick promo, and then we'll come back with breakdown, including reviews of new songs from Jack White, Scorpions, and the brand new Slash album 4 with Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. So stay tuned. We will be right back on the Fortress. Thanks for hanging out during the break here on the Fortress of Rock. You just heard News of the World, our weekly dissection and analysis of the headlines and news items in the realm of hard rock and heavy metal. Next up is Breakdown. We're available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, and Stitcher, with more new platforms coming soon. Thanks again and stay tuned. Welcome back to the Fortress of Rock. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. It is time for my favorite segment each and every week. It is Breakdown, in tribute, of course, to Tom Petty, the late great TP. This is where we look at all the new music. We review songs, albums. Got some good ones this week for you. Let's start with the songs first and foremost. Jack White has released the title track from his upcoming solo album, the first of two he's releasing this year, Fear of the Dawn. Man, this is a face melter. Crazy, wild guitars. It's the equivalent of aerial acrobatics. I mean, it's just dips and loops and crazy stuff, whammy bar all over the place. And it's great. It's fantastic. It's just a nasty rocker, reminiscent of some of the stuff he did back with the White Stripes. And again, I've always said with Jack White, I haven't been able to get into his solo material quite as much as I did when he was with Meg and the White Stripes. He just needs somebody, something to keep him grounded. But so far, what I've been hearing off of Fear of the Dawn, it's sounding pretty good. This could definitely be his best solo album to date. Again, this is just straight on guitar, rock and roll, like you know Jack White can play. Definitely recommend you check out Fear of the Dawn. Also, the Scorpions have released another song off of Rock Believer, which is coming out here pretty soon. Seventh Son. A little bit more what you'd expect from the Scorpions. a little bit more of that big, lumbering 80s hard rock sound to it. Now, this is not, to me, single material. This is like one of those great songs off of, you pick the band, the Scorpions, uh, Triumph, Motley Crue, whoever, that put that longer song in there, especially bands like Scorpions and Triumph. They put in that 5 or 6 minute song. Now, this isn't quite that long, but it's got that feel to it, that epic rock feel to it, where they're trying to do something different. They're not trying to write a radio hit. So far, Seventh Son is my favorite song that I've heard off of the upcoming Rock Believer. So again, both songs, kind of ironically, you've got one with the word dawn in it and one with the word sun in it, S-U-N, not S-O-N. Kind of interesting how those both dropped within the same week. And I recommend both of them, Jack White and Scorpions. Now, album review. I have been waiting for this one for months. And I find it kind of odd for me because while I have the first 3 albums from Slash with Myles Kennedy and The Conspirators, I never really got into them all that much, all that deeply. I'd listened to them maybe 3 or 4 times, and I can't remember the last time I've listened to any of them. Now, that being said, since 4 came out, their latest album, their latest collaboration, been starting to dive back into some of the older stuff, wondering if I missed something, because 4 is absolutely phenomenal. I'll tell you right now, if you take Mammoth WVH from last year out of the equation, 4 is the best rock album I have heard in the last 2 or 3 years, bar none. Unfortunately, that pushes Myles Kennedy's outstanding Ides of March album aside from last year. That was my second favorite album of 2021. This is better. And I love the Ides of March. Not a bad song on 4. 10 tracks. And as we always do here, try to do on the Fortress of Rock, we are going track by track. So first off is the first single. Again, I don't even know if that's the right term anymore, given how most of this stuff is put out there for streaming services and doesn't get a lot of radio airplay. But The River is Rising was the first release from 4 months back. Loved it then, still love it now. Perfect song to kick off the album. Great rocker. I'm going to say this right now before we get any further into the album. I'm just wondering if part of the reason why 4 sounds so good. Now, I've heard that they recorded this as close to live in the studio as they could. That could be part of it. Plus, I wonder now with Slash back in Guns N' Roses, if that hasn't helped re-energize him, and now he's kind of doing a Dave Grohl type thing where he's just getting that energy level back up again, and he's just hitting all the creative notes just right, just perfectly, because his guitar work sounds so good. Better than I have probably ever heard, going all the way back to Appetite. Second song on 4 is my favorite, Whatever Gets You By. Speaking of GNR, this song, along with the final track, which we'll get to later, Fall Back to Earth, those two remind me a lot of GNR songs. Now, Whatever Gets You By has got that nasty, slinky GNR guitar riff that Slash was noted for back in the 90s. Myles Kennedy doesn't quite alter his voice like Axl Rose can, but he kind of does knock it down a little bit, tries to be a little bit sleazy with the vocals. Great song. Fantastic song. keeps rolling with the third song, C'est La Vie. Little bit more of a, I don't want to say radio friendly. Of course, that's an anachronism now, but it is a little, just a shade more poppy than the first two songs. Little bit more accessible for the general audience as opposed to the diehard rockers like you and me. But it's still a great song. Then you get The Path Less Followed. Probably, again, not a weak song on the album, but if I had to say, The Path Less Followed is one of the weaker tracks on 4. Standard rocker. Still better than what most bands could put out there, but compared to some of the other stuff on 4, it does pale a little bit in comparison. Then you've got Actions Speak Louder Than Words, which is a little bit of a step back up. Nice, catchy refrain in the song, long refrain. Try singing Actions Speak Louder Than Words and make it flow. So it does come off as a little cumbersome, a little clunky, but it still works. It is still great. Then I think the most underrated song on the album, from what I've heard from other people who've listened to it and from reviews I've read, Spirit Love to me is a great song. I kind of like the little bit of mysticism involved in it, the otherworldly aspect that Myles Kennedy and Slash try to bring into it. Not too far out there, but the lyrics about, spooky, spiritual nature of love. Definitely like Spirit Love a lot. And then, of course, track 7, Fill My World, was the second release from 4. I've read that Myles Kennedy wrote this song about his dog. So that in and of itself kind of turns me off. But when you read the lyrics to the song, it's not about a dog. So maybe it's dedicated to his dog, even though it seems like it's more of a straightforward rock love song. It's just not exactly my cup of tea, but the more I listen to it, the more I do like it. It is catchy, but it is, if I had to pick the one song on the album, like going back to the 80s, there was always the power ballad. There was always the song that you wanted on radio for the girls, for the women. That would be on this album, Fill My World. And then song 8 is April Fool, another straight on, really solid rocker. Same with number 9, the third release from 4, Call Off the Dogs. Easily one of the 2 or 3 most intense songs on the album. Great song, Call Off the Dogs. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, track 10, the closer, Fall Back to Earth. And I'm not taking credit for this part of the analysis because I did read this in a review online, but the epic, dramatic guitar that Slash puts forth here on Fall Back to Earth kind of reminds you of a lot of the GNR songs that had that, especially the ones off Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. Somebody I saw in a review, again, not taking credit for it, compared it to Estranged. It's a good closer. It's a very good closer. Not one of my favorites on this album, but again, compared to other stuff that's coming out from other bands, still 10 times better than any of that dreck. So as you can tell, overall, I love 4. I think it's a fantastic album. Easily, even though we're only halfway through February, easily my front runner right now for best album of 2022. All right, that's it for Breakdown this week. Next week, of course, I mentioned we'll be reviewing Earthling from Eddie Vedder. But we've got some other stuff in the coming weeks. We'll talk about that once we get to the final segment, wrap it up. But for right now, a quick break, and we'll come back with our birthdays and anniversaries from rock and roll history. So stay tuned. The Fortress will be right back. Hope you enjoyed our breakdown segment, kids, where each and every week we will review the best in hard rock and heavy metal when it comes to new song releases, new albums, and we'll also review current tours and concerts. Next up, I Want to Go Back. We're available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, and Stitcher, with more new platforms coming soon. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Episode 27 here, February the 18th, 2022. We're slogging through this, still dealing with technical issues, but I think I've figured out a way to get this through and out to you on time this week. Hopefully things will be a lot easier next week. So, of course, segment 3 here on the Fortress is always, I Want to Go Back. Our anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, moments in rock history. In this segment, I always like to give credit to my sources, ultimateclassicrock.com and thisdayinmusic.com. They give me the ideas, but as I always say, the opinions attached are mine and mine alone. So let's start out with a couple big anniversaries today, February the 18th, back in 1990. The last public appearance on stage with Queen for Freddie Mercury before he passed. Queen accepted some type of British music award. And of course, Queen has just grown. The legend has just exponentially increased ever since Freddie Mercury passed away. We've seen the resurgence time and time again. It seems like every decade of Bohemian Rhapsody, and of course the movie from a few years back with Rami Malek playing Freddie Mercury and winning the Academy Award for his performance. Queen is now, they keep ascending that list, that rarefied air, where they are considered up there now with the greats of all time, up there with the Beatles and Zeppelin and the Stones. 1995. Now, the cool thing about this, it's not cool because unfortunately we're dealing with someone dying. Bob Stinson, the Replacements guitarist, unfortunately, on this day in 1995, passed away from a drug overdose. So again, I apologize, but bear with me. I've got a 20-year-old daughter, and she listens to music that I have no clue who these people are, and I'm pretty well versed in music, but I just have no idea who these people are. I tried to listen to some of it. She'll shoot me a Spotify playlist every now and then. As much as I tried when she was younger to get her into my music, quote unquote, and she did when she was younger. She enjoyed The Who. She, of course, like me, is a big Van Halen fan. She's gone to see a bunch of concerts with me. She's seen Kiss. She's seen Def Leppard. She's seen REO Speedwagon. She's seen Styx. But now, again, she's kind of faded out on that old school legacy rock and is blazing her own path, her own tastes, and nothing wrong with that, of course. But it is always cool when she surprises me every now and then, listening to somebody from back when I was her age, in recent years. REM, she dabbled in REM a little bit. And now, obviously, since we're talking about the passing of Bob Stinson, that leads into a couple weeks ago when she surprised me and said she's kind of getting into the Replacements. And so, of course, I encouraged her wholeheartedly to go back, get on Spotify, listen to their entire catalog, listen to Paul Westerberg's solo material, his stuff off the Single soundtrack, which I've always said is the greatest rock soundtrack of all time. Of course, we were talking about the grunge era in the first segment, and the Single soundtrack to me is the soundtrack of the grunge era. Of course, you got Soundgarden on there, Pearl Jam's on there. Um, it's just a nice summary of that era of music. So I was very happy that my daughter is giving the Replacements a try. But of course, always sad to look back and remember when guys and women in these influential bands passed away. Unfortunately, I'm trying to tie tragedy into something positive here, talking about the passing of Bob Stinson. Of course, we got a handful of birthdays to celebrate. Unfortunately, again, the first one I've got on my list, I'm going to see the Doobie Brothers here coming up this summer. Oft delayed show. Of course, 50th anniversary, I believe, for them. This is the one where they're bringing back Michael McDonald into the fold. But if you go back to the classic lineup of the Doobie Brothers, their drummer, Keith Knudsen, was born in 1948 on this day. Unfortunately, he passed in 2005. Dennis DeYoung, of course, formerly one of the lead singers of Styx, was born in 1947 on this day, so he's 75 years old. Reminded me a lot in the ways he handled his departure from the band, like Steve Perry handled his with Journey. They both had solo success, but it wasn't comparable to somebody like Sting. You look back at somebody like Bono of U2 who never felt the need to go do the solo thing. And Dennis DeYoung and Steve Perry both claim they had maladies, illnesses and I'm not trying to be insensitive, but the excuses they came up with, I believe Dennis DeYoung's was light sensitivity, which I know it's not a made up thing, but it just seemed like he made it extremely difficult for a while for Styx to actually move on and get back out there in the public eye again. So eventually, finally, they moved on from Dennis DeYoung. I think they're better off for it. It seems like Styx is now a whole cohesive creative unit again. They're putting out new music. Crash of the Crown, of course, came out last year. JY, James Young, and Tommy Shaw, of course, leading the charge. Robbie Bachman, BTO drummer, Bachman Turner Overdrive, born on this day in 1953. He's 69 years old. And this one isn't really rock and roll, but I do like to note, and you guys have seen me do this, heard me do this in the past. Anything that was influential to me when I was growing up that influenced my musical tastes, I do like to note. We talked about Saturday Night Fever on a past episode. So I want to bring up Juice Newton. Juice Newton, born on this day in 1952. She's 70 years old. I know country music is more prevalent now than ever, but it's not the same country music that I grew up with. It's more poppy, a little bit cleaner and shinier nowadays to me than it was back when I was listening to Kenny Rogers or Alabama or Juice Newton. So Juice Newton was one of those crossover country hits. You know, Queen of Hearts was her biggest hit. Um, I did enjoy country music back then. And of course, as I followed Billboard, I was a diehard when it came to reading Billboard every week at the local bookstore. Of course, it was way too damn expensive to buy. So you just had to go into you know, the bookstore because it wasn't the type of magazine they're going to carry at the local grocery store. So you'd have to go to an actual bookstore to look at a copy of Billboard. But I'd go in every week, read the charts, the album charts, the Hot 100. You know, back then they had a really good rock chart. Um, Now it's kind of a joke. But I loved seeing Oak Ridge Boys are another one that would cross over from the country charts into the pop charts. Of course, I listened to Casey Kasem all the time, um, especially back in the late 70s and early 80s. So Juice Newton to me is kind of a little tiny bit of that era for me, of that period of growing up and my musical tastes and styles growing and being formed. So I got to give props to Juice Newton. So that'll do it for I Want to Go Back. Got one more break coming up here, and then I will discuss what I'm going to be reviewing and listening to here over the next few weeks. So hang on, kids. We'll be right back on the Fortress of Rock. Hope you enjoyed I Want to Go Back, our nostalgia trip each and every week, where we look back at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, deaths, significant moments in rock and roll history. Now it's time, as the fabulous Thunderbirds once said, to wrap it up. Keep in mind, we're available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, and Stitcher, hoping to get a lot more new platforms out there for you soon. Stay tuned. Thanks for sticking with us here on the Fortress of Rock through an extremely rough week here. Technical issues, weather issues. But it looks like we'll be able to get this episode of the Fortress of Rock, episode 27, February the 18th, 2022, Spotify, Apple, and Stitcher so far. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, check out the new music we reviewed back in segment 2, / Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators' fantastic album 4. Jack White, Fear of the Dawn, title track from his upcoming album. Another great song off that album. And of course, the Scorpions with Seventh Son. Solid rocker from them. So coming up here, we've got all sorts of stuff. We've got a lot of new album releases coming out here throughout the end of February and into March. But first and foremost, I mentioned, since we were talking about Pearl Jam at the top of the show, we will review Eddie Vedder's Earthling next week. Technically, it's not his first solo album, but it kind of is. if you want to count the Into the Wild soundtrack or ukulele songs, that's fine if you want to. But this is really, I agree with a lot of other people out there. This is really Eddie Vedder's first proper solo album from what I've listened to so far. And again, I was so obsessed over the last week listening to Slash and Myles Kennedy that I didn't get to give Earthling its fair due, even though it came out on the same day. I have now finally started to listen to it, and it is definitely a solid effort, at least from what I've listened to so far. All right, time to drive liberal music fans nuts. Next week, I will review Ted Nugent's American Campfire. Sorry, I had to make that joke. Because, of course, music has to be polarized in this day and age. Everything's got to be political. Can't just enjoy the music. You know, I'm sure many people out there associate Ted Nugent with gun rights, the NRA, Fox News. Just let it go. Listen to the music, which is what I'll do for you, and I will give you my take next week. Still looking into reviewing some Duran Duran tracks that weren't on their last album. Call them B-sides, like we did back in the day. Still looking at listening to Laughing Boy. And there was another one that I just saw pop up today. Sorry, do not have the name of it. As again, I'm trying to catch up here and trying to get through these technical issues. So I didn't get to do the last second research on Fridays that I normally do. So there is another B-side for Duran Duran floating around out there. We'll review that as well, in addition to Laughing Boy. Now, I did see today that the Fixx have put out another song, Woman of Flesh and Blood. They do have a new album coming out, and they are going out on tour. So we will review the latest from the Fixx coming up in the next week or two. And again, as I mentioned, a little bit chaotic here. So I know there's another new Scorpion song. We just reviewed Seventh Son. This week, there is another new release off Rock Believer. We'll get to that here in the next week or two, but just before the album comes out. And there is something out there from Aldo Nova. He has been working on a project for a long time. There have been a couple songs floating around out there over the past few years. There is now a new one. And it looks like finally maybe this project, it looks like it's a 10-song EP. Again, I'll do some more research for you. I will get into it. I will find out because Aldo Nova is awesome. And if he's got new stuff coming, we're going to get into it here on the Fortress of Rock. And then finally, before I bid you adieu, Dream Widow, March of the Insane. And you're going, Dream Widow? Who is Dream Widow, Maestro? Well, Dream Widow is technically Foo Fighters. Dream Widow is a band at the center of their upcoming horror comedy movie, Studio 666. Dave Grohl has promised that there will be a Dream Widow album coming out here within the next week or two to coincide with the release of the movie. The Dream Widow tapes that the Foo Fighters discover in the movie are kind of the linchpin to the plot. So it's kind of neat. They've created this alter ego band. So check out Dream Widow, March of the Insane. I will have a review for you of the song and hopefully some more news on an album coming up next week on the Fortress of Rock. Once again, thanks for hanging with me through all the issues this week. I think this came out pretty clean, so you guys are probably sitting there going, why does he keep talking about technical issues? Trust me, we have had technical issues. So if the podcast episode this week came out sounding good to you, I'm happy, but it took a lot more work than normal to get it out. So, once again, I'm the Maestro. Have a great weekend. Listen to 4. Hopefully, you will not be disappointed. I was not. We will talk to you next week on the Fortress of Rock. Take care.